The Gillard government is shell-shocked. Many of its MPs know they must change leaders, but don't know how, don't know who. To talk about leadership and the High Court decision that triggered this crisis, we have Liberal power broker Michael Kroger and human rights lawyer George Newhouse. George, you stood for the Labor Party in Wentworth. Mate, how does it feel to, have the faith now?
Well, it's a little hard from time to hold the faith, but certainly I wake up every day and I thank God that I'm actually not in Canberra at the moment. I'd much prefer to be practicing the law than be a politician.
There seems to be a widespread despair about how badly Labor has gone after 12 months. Does it surprise you?
Yes, it does actually. It surprises me because our economy stands out from the rest of the world. When you look at what's happening in the US, the UK and Europe, our economy is by far better than those economies, and yet the Labor Party is down in the dumps.
It takes some skill to have got this far, Michael. What is Labor to do to restore its fortunes?
Well, Andrew, I said in this program months ago that Gillard should resign, was going to resign, and she is going to resign, and she'll resign, I would think, by Christmas. The only question we're waiting for is the only answer we're waiting for is to whom. Labor have changed the leadership 6 times since Keating, which is why I can't believe they'll go to Simon Crean, because he's going to last one election. They wouldn't anticipate him leading to 216, are they? So it'll have to be Bill Shorten, and Shorten will lose this election and to be competitive in the next one.
Does he really want Michael to be going in his first election to be absolutely slaughtered?
No one wants to. But Australians have a history of giving a lot of credit to a leader who loses an election, remains standing, and then comes back. Kennett lost twice before he won. Howard lost. Bob Carr lost. There's a lot of leaders who have lost an election, and the electorate says, we give you credit for standing up in difficult times. That's what Shorten will get. He'll actually get the opposite if he squibs it and doesn't run this time and they put in a stopgap leader. That'll be bad for Shorten. Ultimately, he'll be the leader of the Labor Party. He should bring it on now. He should get rid of the carbon tax, delay it to until there's an international agreement. He should tell Wilkie where to go, because they're not going to pass the poker machine legislation anyway. He should concentrate on Labor's core values, health, education. In that way, Shorten will not only save the furniture, he'll get respect and he'll be competitive in 215.
But George, isn't the counter-argument there that Bill Shorten is an unknown person to most people, is an unknown quantity in terms of leadership? He's only assistant treasurer. At least Simon Crean can promise stable, boring, basically competent government, which I think is what Labor needs. It's just a period of take the politics off the front page and just basic competence.
Well, look, Andrew, I'm not going to enter into speculation on who the contenders are for the job. Julia Gillard is the Prime Minister. She says she's going to tough it out. There's no serious contender at the moment. And all this discussion is really a distraction from the main game, which is governing Australia. That's what Australians want to see.
But George, the despair in Labor ranks in Canberra is just astonishing. They can't pull a trick, and every time they think they might bed it down, there's another disaster. Live trade export last month, High Court decision this month, what next month? Well,
you don't change leaders because of a High Court decision. I've seen plenty of High Court decisions go against the Howard government, even the Menzies government, and those Prime Ministers didn't resign as a result of an adverse decision. So let's just stop the distractions and get on with the governing of the country.
Well, talking about the High Court decision, Michael, it was astonishing to me that Julia Gillard responded so angrily by personally attacking, you can criticise the judgment, but personally attacking the Chief Justice, Robert French, to the point where the Judicial Conference of Australia, which represents the nation's judges, reprimanded her for being irresponsible, and that her attack on the Chief Justice was extraordinary, unfair and curious.
Well, I think that's probably right. Criticise the judgment, and we had a number of ministers during the Howard government period criticise High Court decisions, but never the Prime Minister, I don't think. And I think it was unbecoming of Gillard to do that. And in any case, the Labor Party likes judicial activism. They love these types of decisions. They have for decades. George, you and your ilk love the High Court intervening and basically saying to the Parliament, no, we're running the country, not you. But she shouldn't be complaining. It was unbecoming the Prime Minister, but this is just another example. Gillard has completely lost control of the country, of the government. To say she's not a quitter, there's no virtue in saying I'm not a quitter. I mean, Downer quit the Liberal Party leadership. He did the right thing by the Liberal Party himself and the country. He became one of Australia's greatest ever foreign ministers. There would have been no virtue in Downer saying, I'm toughing it out. No one gives credit. She should do the right thing by the Labor Party and resign. immediately.
But George, I want to ask you about some of the lashing out by Labor at the High Court. Touched on something I think is a truth. I wanted to show you a clip from David Bradbury, who's one of the Labor's parliamentary secretaries, where he suggested that the High Court would now have blood on its hands if there was another Christmas Island kind of disaster. Have a look at the clip.
It won't be members of the High Court that take the phone call that Chris Bowen had to take after a boat crashed into the rocks at Christmas Island.
Is he right? Because by my count, there's between 200 and 300 people who have drowned at sea since Labor relaxed the laws.
Well, look, he's not right. It's not appropriate to criticise the High Court for making a decision about the law. There's a separation of powers, and I do agree with you, Michael, that I am quite happy to see that decision of the High Court. The government is subject to checks and balances, and the High Court found that the decision to send asylum seekers to Malaysia did not comply with the Migration Act. So I thought that the court decision was perfectly in order, and that the language that has been used to criticise the court was a little intemperate.
And yet I think we must accept that relaxing the laws has led to up to 300 people drowning at sea. You're involved in the Christmas Island inquest, representing families of the victims. You've also raised another missing boat of 97 people on board, disappeared in November last year. What's the story here?
Look, Andrew, it is legitimate to be concerned about people arriving by sea. It is an extremely dangerous thing to do, and I've seen the results. The Christmas Island tragedy is heartbreaking. The fact that there are 97 people who boarded a boat in November last year and who've been missing ever since is also heartbreaking. But I think that there's an element of hypocrisy in those people who use the argument that you shouldn't come by sea as a cover for actually not wanting asylum seekers in Australia.
But whether it's hypocrisy or not, George, the basic fact is that those people saying relax the laws, like the Bob Browns, are encouraging a trade in which people do drown at sea. You may say that we're hypocrites for mentioning it or whatever, but that is the basic bottom line.
But Andrew, we live in a world where we can put men on the moon. Now, it seems to me that we can have a migration policy, an immigration policy, that deters people coming by boat without destroying their psychological well-being, without brutalising them and without breaching their human rights. If you're saying to me that the only way we can deter people is by beating them, sending them to Malaysia, where there's the potential for them to be beaten, where their human rights are denied, well, I just don't accept that.
Michael, the attacks, though, on the High Court, it seemed to me to form a pattern. Julia Gillard, for example, has tried to stop a story about embarrassing parts of her past, a relationship with a con man. No one's accusing her directly of any impropriety herself. But to kill the story, she's phoned the head of News Limited Australia to squash these reports. We've seen 2UE, a station, one of the programs there, censored repeatedly to stop the airing of this. And now Glenn Milne, the commentator who wrote the initial story in the Australian that's been scrubbed, has been sacked by the ABC as a commentator on Insiders. What's your take?
Well, as a former board member of the ABC, I find this all very curious about what's happened to Milne. It's very murky, all these phone calls she made to senior people at News Limited and their decision to suddenly withdraw this column and print an apology without proper explanation.
What's the question for the ABC now?
The question for the ABC is who made this decision to get rid of Milne?
And who?
I mean, he's been criticised for writing not for anything he's done at the ABC, but for something else. Who made the decision at the ABC? Did anyone call them? Did anyone put pressure on them? Did the managing director get involved? Did the board get involved? Were there calls from the government? This is what needs to be explained this morning.
Excellent questions. Michael Kroger, George Newhouse, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure, Andrew.